Hello and welcome to this masterclass. My name is Dr. Karina Smith, and in this masterclass that you're joining with me today, we're going to be diving deep into all things spring. So the first part of our session together is going to be a walkthrough essentially of what Chinese medicine has to say regarding the season of spring. So we're going to go through meridians, what's happening to the directions of qi, how we might take care of our bodies during this time, which includes perhaps some new ways of thinking about food for this season. And then we're going to follow all of that up with a guided yin yoga practice, so you get a chance to embody all of the information from our session. So I'm really excited that you could join me today. And without further ado, we're going to get into it. So welcome to spring, wherever you might be in the world. And I hope that it is going well for you if you happen to be watching this during springtime. Interestingly enough, here where I'm based, which is Melbourne, Australia, it was very, very interesting to feel spring come in. We had a very, very still winter. Yes, it was cold, but almost immediately as the dates clicked over, we had this extremely windy weather that blew into town. And it was almost like this wind that blows out the previous season to welcome in the new season. And I found that really interesting this year. So as we go through our presentation together, feel free to follow along or make any notes that you like. We're going to start by talking about the energetic movement of spring. So that wind is definitely something that we're going to discuss today, because wind definitely plays into spring. But really the main energetics of spring is this upward and outward movement. So spring is governed by the season of wood, if we were going to look at a 5-element chart, which we will be looking at in a couple of slides' time. So if you think about the movement of a tree and how much of the element of wood a tree entails, it's got a very upward and outward kind of energy. And during winter, everything really goes underground. You know, in some places in the world, literally that's what happens. Animals take their young underground into their burrows and they hibernate. It gets really cold, perhaps there's snow blanketing the earth. And then by the time we get to spring, there's this beautiful warmth that returns, a thawing out that happens, and then plants and animals both begin to rise up and emerge from the earth. So springtime is governed by that same energetic upward and outward movement that we see in the element of wood. And how well a person has rested and rejuvenated in winter will determine how much energy they have to draw from in spring. So that's really key when we think about how we're taking care of our health all year round. Some people really struggle in winter because they don't like to slow down. They really don't like the cold, and they feel that when the days get darker, they lose their productivity. But there's definitely something to be said for why we slow down in winter, why the season wants us to go to bed earlier. It's so that when we get to this time of the year and we arrive in spring, we've actually got something to draw from when we want to be up and out and heading out and exercising and moving into the evenings that are warmer. When we're thinking about the organ systems that Chinese medicine talk about during the season, we really start to focus in on the liver and the gallbladder organs. And sometimes this can get a bit confusing when we're thinking about straight up Western medicine organs. So we are definitely talking about the organs themselves, the liver and the gallbladder, but it's not just the organs alone. We're thinking about all of the wide functions that the network of the liver system and the network of the gallbladder system do for the body. What is their relationship between each other? How do the liver and the gallbladder support each other? And how do we start to pay attention to when those network systems in the body need some extra support from us, or they're trying to communicate to us something that we need to make changes about? So the liver and the gallbladder energies is a little bit of a different conversation from the organs themselves. So in Chinese medicine, we're always contemplating the emotions of a person, and the emotions that might be out of balance can give us some clues about what that patient or that person needs when it comes to, say, an acupuncture protocol or particular herbs to support that energy in the body. So all of the 5 major yin organs, the liver being a yin organ, are said to have a particular kind of strong emotion about them, and they can have a positive and a negative emotion. And so for actually both the liver and the gallbladder organs, the negative emotion, or the emotion that tells us that something's a bit out of whack, is when we are in full irritation mode. If that irritation mode blows out, that can be extreme anger or bursts of anger, having a really short temper, and feeling that sense of tension rising up inside. Some people are really good at letting off steam, and they can have a blowout and then they feel better. And some people kind of hold it in, and then that tension really can be felt in the body. So I don't know about you, but if you've ever found yourself in a heightened state of frustration or irritation or anger, you know, what do you feel in your body when you're in those states? For myself, I can definitely feel this tightening happen, almost like my whole body is like a guitar that's been overtuned, and everything just sort of feels like it's become tight and tense. And then when you get to relieve yourself of that emotion, everything seems to soften again. And that's a great analogy for the liver energy, because the liver energy is responsible for flowing all around the body, and it needs to stay in that flow. And when it's not flowing, there's going to be stuckness or tightness. On the flip side to that, we consider that the more positive emotion of the liver and the gallbladder is hope, a hopefulness, or kind of a looking forward to things, kind of casting your imagination into the future and placing yourself in a new scenario where things are positive and upward. And the kind of upward feeling of hope that can come into the body when you're in that emotional state is more of a lifting and expanding emotion. So those two kinds of states are great to look out for, because they might tell you what's actually going on in my body right now, and are there particular foods that I might be wanting to eat to support that? Are there particular mental practices that I might want to bring in to help smooth out the flow of my liver chi? The liver is considered to influence our capacity for making plans and having a sense of direction in life. In a couple of slides' time, I'm going to go through more of the functions of the liver from a Chinese medicine perspective. But one of the major ones is how the liver is considered to be like an army general. So if you think about an army general, he's the one directing the flow of traffic. So he's the one kind of calling the shots and making sure that troops are moving to a particular place where they need to be to perform a particular function that they need to perform. And so that's very much about traffic control, making sure that things are flowing in the direction that they should be flowing in. And then when you apply that to the context of life, that liver energy is really important for making future plans and being able to move into that direction without second guessing yourself or doubting yourself or sabotaging your own plans, or even just not having the confidence or faith in yourself in the first place to believe that that plan could be something you can work towards. The gallbladder, which is a sweet little gland that lives underneath the liver, has got some very similar emotions and concepts related to it. The gallbladder is considered to be a yang organ, but these guys are very much a pair. So the liver and the gallbladder, they work together in a Western medicine framework in terms of all the physiological things that they do in the body, but also energetically, your gallbladder is said to be the seat of your courage. The gallbladder shares the same emotional ideas of anger and resentment, but also the gallbladder helps to play into the liver's role of decisiveness and courage. So in some cultures, I've heard that somebody might call a person who's got a really big sense of self a person who has a lot of gall. Or somebody who makes really bodacious moves and puts themselves out there is somebody who's got a lot of gall. And yet somebody who might be quite timid, and shy and reserved and doesn't necessarily want to put themselves out there in their life might be called somebody who's got a little gallbladder. Just an interesting bit of pop culture there. So working in with the liver, the gallbladder also helps to influence our capacity to make courageous decisions. So in order for you to make a plan in your life and see yourself heading in a particular direction, you need that liver energy to call the shots, but you also need that gallbladder energy coming up from underneath to give you that courage in the first place to believe that you could head in that direction. So these two are very much a team that work together. So before we go into the details of both of those separate organ systems, we'll just talk a little bit about the 5-element wheel. So this is just a nice way to contextualize the 5 elements and how the body needs all of these elements to be in flow. But then of course, in different seasons of the year, different elements will shine, but always these elements are trying to be harmonious with each other in the body. And quite often they are out of whack. One of the biggest things that sends all of this out of whack in our modern day life is stress. So that's just something to bear in mind. So if you take a look at the 5-element wheel here, we can see that if you look at the very top of that, we've got the fire element. And the fire element is represented in the body by the heart and the pericardium, which is the protective sac around the heart. It also is represented by the small intestine and something which we call the triple burner or the sanjiao, which is quite a big topic, and we're not going to focus on that too much today. But the sanjiao could be likened a little to your lymphatic system, your fluids in the body. So fire is the element that creates the earth element. So sometimes we say that fire is the mother of earth. The earth element is represented really by your digestive system. And in Chinese medicine, we give that responsibility to the organs of the stomach and the spleen. So the earth element really is your kind of gut, your earth center. And then earth is the mother, or earth produces the metal element in the body. In the human body, the metal element is represented by the lungs and the large intestine. The metal element is then said to be the mother of the water element. So metal produces water in the body. The water element in the body is represented by the water organs of the kidneys and the bladder. And then the water element is said to be the mother of wood, which is where we come to in the season of spring. And the wood element, as we've been discussing, is represented by the liver and the gallbladder. So if we start just there, if you think about water being poured over a young sapling tree, it's the water that helps the wood to grow. So water engenders wood to grow. If we chop down a lot of wood and we burn that kindling and we burn those logs, that is the fuel that we use to help create fire or give fire something to burn through. So wood, the wood element, helps to create fire or engenders fire. The fire element, when all of that fire is put out and all of that wood turns to ash, that ash returns to the earth. So everything that's left over from a fire in a fire pit returns back to the soil. So fire engenders the earth. And the earth is the storehouse of all of the precious metals inside the earth, such as things like iron, or gemstones, or copper, or other kinds of mineralities. So that's why the earth element is considered to engender the metal element. And the metal element engenders the water element because when metal gets really cold, it actually can release fluid from it. So really, really cold metal can have condensation. And metal can be melted. So a metal can be boiled down into a liquid. And that's how the metal element engenders water. So everything needs to flow in a circle there. It's not one aspect that we're looking at in spring, but we're looking at everything in harmony. So if you just follow that in a clockwise way, that tells you which element creates the next element. But this 5 element system also has a mechanism of making sure that all of those elements are kept in check. And we call that the controlling cycle. So within those 5 elements, the control cycle is basically a 5-pointed star. So if we start up at the fire element, we can see that fire helps to control metal. So if there's enough heat, metal can stay soft instead of being steely and firm and too hard and too rigid. The metal element can control the wood element. If you think of a sharp instrument, or an axe is usually the example given, that can cut the wood down if the wood is overgrowing and becoming too numerous. The wood element controls the earth element. If you think about a forest full of trees growing their roots down into the earth, the roots of the tree can hold that earth in place and keep it under control. The earth element controls the water element. So if there was a flood, the earth and the soil around that flood would eventually absorb all of that fluid and control the water and bring the water back into the soil. And the water element can control fire. That one's a nice and easy one. If the fire is blazing and there's too much, we can pour water over it to reduce it or put it out. There's one last aspect to this 5-element wheel, which is the rebellion cycle, the rebelling cycle. And so for the rebelling cycle, it's when you've got one element that's pushing back, that's getting a bit bratty, that's causing problems in the wheel and the flow because it's out of balance. And that's when you take that 5-pointed star and you just move backwards. You do a reverse direction with that 5-pointed star. So if we've got some trouble going on in that flow, it would mean that metal is pushing back on the fire, fire is pushing back on the water, water might be pushing back on the earth, earth pushing back on wood, wood pushing back on the metal. And sometimes we see things like that in the body, especially with the wood-earth relationship. So because I said before that stress is a really big factor for affecting the flow of chi in the body, a common thing that we see is the wood element pushing back on the earth element. So the liver is really unhappy and it's being quite bratty, and it's kind of insulting is the word we often use, insulting the earth element. And that can lead to things like upset digestive system, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and other kinds of upsets to the harmony, that sort of horizontal line of liver, gallbladder, and stomach and spleen going through the body. It's not always the reason why somebody's got upset digestive system, but it's a really good example of the kinds of things you might see in the rebellion cycle. So if you haven't heard this word before, chi, we're going to talk about, just in brief here, what that word indicates, what that actually means or is describing in the body. You might have heard of the words prana. Sometimes prana is called life force. And I think chi and prana are definitely describing the same thing in the body. So my understanding of chi is that it's sort of an unseen energetic that animates the body, but it's not limited at all by the human form. It is an extremely amazing cosmic force, but it's also something that can be felt on the micro level. So one explanation is that chi is the smallest possible division of functional potential, which kind of means that chi is the seed of something beginning before it has even come into being manifest. So it's kind of like consciousness. It's kind of like an idea, and it's just simply an idea. But then it can also be something that comes into being and becomes material, becomes cells that divide in the human body, becomes limbs that grow, is controlling the embryological process of the human body taking form. Specialized cells become a particular organ, and then they know when to stop. So I believe that all of that is conducted by chi. And in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, we understand that chi flows all through the body, but there are some very particular pathways And that's why we can use lovely skills like acupuncture to help clear blockages or increase the flow of that qi, so the body is brought back to a place where it can heal itself and run itself well. This is the horary clock, and if you have been present to other presentations such as these, you'll probably be a little bit familiar with this. The concept of the horary clock is that during a 24-hour time period, you've got qi running through all of these meridians, but each organ system and its meridian will have a peak time and a low time of when it's going to have more of an abundance of qi flowing through it, and then a period of slightly lower qi running through it. So from 7 a.m. all the way back to 7 a.m., it's divided into 2-hour blocks of each organ, and it flows all the way around. The liver falls into the time between 1 and 3 a.m. And I always find it very interesting how many people tell me that they can go to bed, they can fall asleep really easily, but they wake up sharp between 1 and 3 a.m. They've got no idea why, they're wide awake, and they either can't fall back asleep or they keep waking up frequently during that time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something physically wrong with their liver organ, but what I would want to investigate is what's going on to disrupt the flow of qi through that organ at that time. And when we look at all the functions and things that the liver has to do, it's very easy for us to overload it, and it's very easy for us to go to bed with the liver already on the task of its nighttime jobs, and we've given it a whole bunch of extra things to process overnight, and then it wakes us up. So that's just an interesting concept about that particular time, and I'm sure you're now thinking about times when you wake up in the middle of the night. The gallbladder is just before that, between 11 and 1. So perhaps it's that someone's waking up a little bit earlier than that. So we also have two different kinds of concepts of qi that are pretty relevant for our life. One is this idea of prenatal qi. Prenatal qi is said to be the qi that you inherited from your parents at the time of conception, and then it's stored in your kidneys, and it's quite a fixed set blueprint of what you're drawing from in your life. It could also be said to be your DNA or the genetic materials that you've received from your parents. And your postnatal qi is the way that you can top up with that. You can top up onto that every day with the food that you eat and the air that you breathe. And I would also kind of add to that the state of your mind. So we've got prenatal and postnatal qi as aspects to consider when we're thinking about energy flow in the body. So when we're thinking about the liver in Chinese medicine, some of the functions definitely overlap with things that we know the liver does from a more biomedical perspective. And some of them are really different. So this first one that I mentioned before, the liver is considered to be the army general. So therefore, the liver is said to be, of all the organs, the one most responsible for the smooth free flow of qi everywhere in the body. That's its job, is to make sure that energy is flowing well. When qi is flowing well, fluids will also be flowing well, because we understand that qi is about movement and qi moves fluids. So that would also include things like blood circulation, or the arrival of the menstrual period and the ease in which somebody has their period, their cycle. The liver therefore has a massive relationship to blood. So we already know that from a Western medical perspective, that the liver is perhaps the most highly vascular organ in the body, and it's very, very big. So of all of the organs that you have, the liver can undergo quite a bit of damage before it's really in trouble. And the liver can also regenerate itself. So people can live on quite a small amount of a liver in their body if they've had to have some removed. And liver transplants can also be really great to graft onto liver lobes for the liver to regenerate itself. And that all has to do with the fact that there's so much blood available. Because of its massive amount of vascularity, we know that at any given time, the liver is storing a great deal of your blood. because all of your blood has to pass through your liver for a certain amount of detoxification. And so the liver is cleaning your blood all the time. So if there are a lot of medications being taken, or if there's a lot of chemicals being ingested by the body, or toxic things that are on fruit and vegetables that people are eating, or even a high abundance of particular hormones being created in the body, it's the liver's job to break all of that down and clean it. And that's a lot of work. We understand in Chinese medicine that the liver stores blood, much in that same way. So liver blood is said to keep everything soft and nourished in the body, and that includes all of your soft tissues. So tendons, ligaments, even your cartilage. Most of the time in the body, the cartilage doesn't have a massive blood supply, which is why it takes so long to heal, just to make that connection again. But also your eyes, your nails, your reproductive organs, all of that is necessary for the liver to maintain in terms of softness and nourishment. So if somebody has liver blood deficiency, and that would probably line up best with the diagnosis of anemia, where someone's either got not enough iron being transported around their body or their red blood cell count is low, then we're going to see that that person is really pale. We might even see that that person seems to have repeated niggles in their body that just don't seem to heal well. Maybe their nails look like they're forming with lots of ridges, or their eyes are always dry. They might have black floaters in their vision if they were to look up at a white ceiling or a white wall. The liver and its role with blood, keeping the body soft and nourished, is really, really important. So part of that conversation is making sure that we're eating blood building foods. If we're on diets that are really devoid of dark leafy greens, or even meats for people that eat meats, bone broths, and a nice amount of rich fruits and vegetables, then the body is not going to be able to create the blood that we need to support all of the tissues of the body. And that includes the liver itself. So the liver itself needs to stay soft and nourished. When we were talking before about why the liver might kick off, why it might push back and be rebellious, sometimes it can be because there is not enough blood and it's kind of dry and cranky. The liver loathes wind, and this wind can be internal, so wind that can stir up inside the body, and it could be gas, or it could also be wind that can get into the body because there are spaces for it to get in. We see that as something that usually only occurs if there's blood deficiency in the first place. But a lot of the time, the liver really is more affected by external wind. So before, when I said that when spring blew into town here, it was really windy. And it wasn't just like a light breeze, it was aggressive. Whenever I hear that kind of wind, I just sort of say to myself, well, I'm not going outside today, because I already know for myself that to be in that kind of environment where the wind is pushing me around makes me really irritated. So right off the bat, I know that my liver chi is being disrupted because of the way that it changes my emotional state. I don't know, maybe you're already thinking about times where you have felt like that, or you've noticed your dog getting really weird and ratty on a windy day, or maybe you've got kids, toddlers, kids in primary school that just have like a total change of their emotional state if they've been outside playing in the wind. Something to think about, something to observe for this moment on. As we already said, the liver organ is ruled by the wood element. The color of the liver, not literally, but the color that represents the liver is the color green. If your actual liver is green, something is wrong. But the color green is said to be the one most in affinity with the wood element. So I always just think about this time of the year and looking at new shoots growing on trees, and the green color being such an integral color that tells you that something is vibrant and fresh and alive. The emotions, as we discussed before, are anger and irritability, frustration, short-temperedness, and also hopefulness, things rising up, things expanding. It's all about making plans and having a sense of direction. In terms of foods, the sour taste is said to support the liver. Now, you can have too much or too little of anything and everything. So it's not that you should kind of load up the body on heaps of really sour foods, but a little bit of sour food is said to help contain or astringe the energies of the liver. So some people like to have hot lemon and water all year round in the morning, in the beginning of their day. I'd say that spring is probably the best season to incorporate that in your diet, especially if in winter you were loading up a lot with quite rich, heavy stews and bone broths to top up your jing and replenish all of that energy after autumn. Spring might be that time where you need a little degreaser. You need a little opportunity to relieve the liver of breaking down all of those fats and animal proteins and just give it its spring clean. The time is between 1 and 3 a.m. on the Harari clock, as we discussed, and its yang pair is the gallbladder. If we're thinking about the actual meridian pathway in the body, and this pathway is bilateral, so it's traveling up the right and the left leg, it's got quite particular landmarks that it travels through. And so this might be more relevant for an acupuncturist who's actually needling into this channel. But if you're watching this because you're interested about yin yoga and how different postures that you might have done in a yin practice or postures that you instruct in a yin practice, sometimes it's nice to get some ideas of the actual pathway so that you can line up your sequences with the information that you're receiving here. So the liver channel begins down at the feet, on both sides. And it starts just in between the big and second toe, at the inside corner of the nail of the big toe. That would be the first point on the liver channel. And then it begins to travel up between the long bones of the big toe and the second toe. And sometimes it's a nice test to actually take your finger or your thumb and palpate or feel your way. My hand is now a foot. Feel your way from that webbing up until you reach a bit of a bone corner, and probably, likely, in that little bit there's going to be quite a tender spot. And if someone's really angry, don't push it hard, but if someone's really angry, that might be even more tender, or sometimes it's even slightly swollen. That's a very, very powerful point on the liver channel to move the chi. And they won't like it initially when it's needled, but they will probably feel better once it's done. Maybe try it on yourself first, just by pushing. Then the channel begins to travel up the front of the ankle. And it travels up the inside line of the lower leg, so close to the shin bone, your tibia. And then it travels up the medial aspect of the thigh and crosses over the front of the hip flexor. So in a lot of yin practices, this will be where everyone brings in those ideas of your dragons, your lunges, your hip opening shapes for the liver channel in spring. And that's why, because this is a very hotbed region of where that channel travels. Doesn't mean that the whole class should be dragons, but that's why. That's why these things have been overlaid with each other. At this point around the pelvis, the channel will do a deep dive into the abdomen. So there's an internal pathway through the reproductive organs and the lower abdomen, especially for women, women of reproductive age. The liver channel has a lot to do with the arrival of menstrual blood. It's also got a lot to do with the ovulation arriving as well. So the liver channel and the liver organ have a lot to do with the reproductive cycle of a female. Then the channel moves to the side waist, so it comes back to the abdomen. It moves into the side waist, right at the free end of your 11th rib. And then it travels up into about the 6th rib space, directly above the previous point. At that point, it does another bit of a deep dive, and it will continue moving all the way up through the throat, the eyes, and it will come to finish right up at the very top of the head. So sometimes as well, if someone gets frequent vertex headaches, where they really feel that headache landing and sitting at the top of the head, we'll do a bit of investigation there around what's going on with the liver. Sometimes there's not enough yin to anchor the liver yang and it rises up. Sometimes it's that liver wind stirring things up and in worst case scenarios, that wind can stir all the way up and begin to turn into a really angry migraine. That's just some of the things that can be going on up through the channel. And when we think about the gallbladder, it's got a lot of similar functions. We often find that the yang organs don't have as many amazing new features in Chinese medicine as the yin organs, but they're still very, very important. So the gallbladder is a little gland that sits underneath the liver organ, so it's just kind of tucked underneath, and it's very important because it's a storage place for your bile, and we need that bile to break down fats in our diet. Bile is made by the liver, but it's stored in the gallbladder, and then when we eat fats, the gallbladder will secrete that out into the intestines to help break down that fat. So its primary function is that, storing and excreting bile. And as we said before, the gallbladder is also about helping us to control decisiveness. So being able to feel that we can drop into our courage and make decisions, and then those decisions can be actioned by the liver. So it's kind of like the liver's coach, if you will, and then the liver can just make their commands and everything can flow with ease, and those two things are working together. The gallbladder is the yang aspect of the liver. It also is representing the wood element, and it shares those same emotions, especially the negative ones of anger or resentment, frustration, short-temperedness, but courage on the flip side. Courage to dream into what might be, courage to make a bold move in your own life. The sour taste, the sour taste also supports the gallbladder, and its time on the Harari clock is between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Its yin pair is the liver. Its channel pair is the sanjiao, which we're not going into with too much detail today, but the gallbladder and the lymphatic system of the body are there to, they are a very moving system together. So they're a really great system to access if you're an acupuncturist, to try and get energy that's stuck to move through the body. The gallbladder is also said to be associated with good mobility and balance in movement, especially around the ankles. And when we look at the channel pathway, we'll see that there's quite a concentration of points around the outer lateral ankle. The gallbladder pathway, which I always find interesting because it's said to be about courage and decisiveness and moving forward, is very much the most zigzaggy, confused channel of all of them. And it begins at the outside corner of the eye, on both sides of the body. The channel moves sideways to the depression at the front of the ear, and then it travels up on a diagonal line from the forehead and back down to the front of the ear. It circles around the ear right to the tip of the mastoid bone behind the ear, and it travels then back to the outside of the eye and moves up to the hairline, and then up and over the skull, just outside where the bladder channel runs. It travels all the way down to the base of the skull. It then travels down to the top of the trapezius muscles, that region where somebody might grab your upper back and try and give you a massage, and you can kind of wince if they're too aggressive with that. And then the channel zigzags its way down the lateral side of the body. At that point, it interweaves in between where the liver channel is already running, and then it moves deep into the gluteal region. So right into that spot where you might have, perhaps in a yoga class, put a tennis ball right into the back of your glutes and rolled around. You're in big time gallbladder region there. Then it travels all the way down the lateral sides of the legs, so all the way down the ITB, the iliotibial band, and the lateral side of your calf. And then at this point, it travels down to the outside of the foot, the lateral foot, around the lateral malleolus bone. And then it comes to finish in between the fifth and the fourth toes and finishes at the outside nail corner of the fourth toe. Pretty much when it arrives there, it's very close to the beginning of the liver channel. So another reason why these channels are paired together is that they actually feed into each other. So with all of that in mind, where are these channels in the body? What might be coming up if they're a bit disrupted? Why are they so interesting to explore during spring? It's also a good topic to discuss how we can manage our self-care during spring, having all of this background information. So given that winter can feel a bit sluggish and stagnant, depending on where you live in the world, some winters are quite brutal and you can't even go outside because there's snow piling up everywhere. Or it's just the temperatures are so low that if you're outside for a period of time, you might be in a bit of danger. So when spring begins to come around, it's this amazing welcome to come outside and look up at the sky and feel the warm sun on your face and feel the sunlight just brightening up the world. So this is the time of the year where we're gently beginning to include more movement into our routine. Gentle walks, stretching, especially when you think about the liver's role in conducting qi through all of your connective tissues. Being in nature, moving qi that might have been stagnant over the winter time. This might also be the time when you begin to add a little bit more sour food into the diet, so that sour taste supporting the liver. Spring cleaning of any kind, whether it's a gentle cleanse. This could be a good time to do a monitored vegetable fruit cleanse, or a small hiatus from the rich, heavy stews you might have been eating over winter, and monitor your portions, or include more sprouts or green new shoots, leafy green vegetables. But also spring cleaning your house. When it's been cold and you've just been tucked up inside, everything can feel like it gets a bit stale in the house as well. So really nice, just open up all the windows, give the floors a really good clean, dust the house. Maybe you want to go through your stuff. All of that can feel really amazing during spring. Like you've just had this big, enormous cull, lightened your load, letting go of what no longer serves you. It's a great time of the year to bring more awareness to our food quality and intake. But also if we're thinking about those tough emotions of the liver, frustration, anger, irritation, sometimes it's a lovely time of the year to start thinking about new mindfulness practices that you want to include. And one of my favorites is loving kindness meditations. So I have found for myself in the past that when I have been in conflict with somebody, or even just if there's someone I'm working with who pushes my buttons, or someone I'm watching in the news that's pushing my buttons, they have no idea. And I'm the one who is stuck in the emotion of it. I'm the one that can feel it tightening up those guitar strings of my body. So what can I do about it? I have always found that loving kindness meditations are an extremely powerful way for me to change my state and resolve conflict that really is only in my mind. And so that is a great suggestion that I have for you for this time of year, or any time of the year. In fact, if that's something that comes up a lot for you, internal turmoil and conflict with others. And it also helps us to really soften our resentments and anger, which is the most important thing about it. And then just to wrap up, I'm going to share with you the section from the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine and what is said in there about the season of spring. So this is a really ancient text that is written, and it's written in that way of teacher and disciple, or guru and disciple, where the student is simply asking a series of questions about all sorts of things, from the cosmos to acupuncture to herbs to pulses. But also there's a lovely chapter in there about the seasons and how we can try and drop into being harmonious with the seasons, and then how that takes care of our health. So this is what the guru has to say to the disciple about spring. The 3 months of the spring season bring about the revitalization of all things in nature. It is the time of birth. That is when heaven and earth are reborn. During this season, it is advisable to retire early, arise early and go walking in order to absorb the fresh, invigorating energy. Since this is the season in which the universal energy begins anew and rejuvenates, one should attempt to correspond to it diligently by being open and unsuppressed. On a physical level, it is good to exercise more frequently. This is the time to stretch, to loosen up the tendons and muscles. Emotionally, it is good to develop equanimity. As spring is the season of the liver, indulgence in anger, frustration, depression, and sadness can injure the liver. Furthermore, violating the natural order of spring will cause cold disease during the following summer. So in no way there is that a statement on ignoring mental health or a judgment call on mental health if there has been significant depression and sadness that's come up during the season. It's more about paying attention to what's going on in the body and this recognition that one season flows into the next. So if we have a really rough time in one season and we're eating completely against what that season is suggesting, for example, all winter you eat raw salads and have icy cold water and you're out in the cold, it's quite possible that in springtime you're going to feel a bit cold, or you're going to feel like things are a little bit off. And cold disease is something that's focused on a lot in Chinese medicine, but it's freezing in some places in winter in China. So they have quite a focus on cold. And that concludes our presentation. So I hope that was enjoyable, insightful. I hope that there were new nuggets in there that you can now learn and bring into your own world or your own self-care for this season. There's a little bit of a reference list here for if you want to do more reading or looking into where I've gathered my sources for today. So in just a little bit of time, we're going to meet back again for our guided yin practice. And for this practice, it's going to be a great idea if you can grab yourself a yoga block and a mat and some space and probably something to keep you warm for Shavasana. And I'll see you very soon. Welcome back. I hope that now we can take some time to let all of that information from the presentation settle into the body. And so we're going to move through a yin yoga sequence now that's going to give you a chance to feel into those liver and gallbladder pathways, but also to touch base with your breath. And we're also going to start with a little bit of a movement with that idea of stretching out the tissues, getting into your connective tissue and your sinews to start. So all I have prop-wise for this practice is a block. I'm getting bathed in really warm sunlight, which is great, but you might want to have a shawl or a blanket for your Shavasana. So please make sure that you've got what you need for your practice. And then we're going to come and start in an upright seat. So just make sure that that upright seat is comfortable for you. Eyes could be opened or closed. Allowing yourself a really decent moment to settle into this seat. Allowing your sitting bones to drop into what you're sitting on. For the belly to soften. For the jaw to relax. The intention of this practice is to gently reawaken our upward and outward energy, and to also help us come back closer to the place where we begin to make plans for our life, directions to head in, and the confidence within yourself to make those decisions in the first place. So as we reawaken the body with movement, also beginning to cultivate the feeling of courage deep inside. Taking one more breath in and out. And slowly collecting your hands into prayer. Welcome to this practice. Namaste. So I'm going to stay seated for this next exercise. It's a breath exercise. If you feel like you need the rest today, you could lay down, but we're going to come back up to sitting for what comes to follow. So if you are all right to stay sitting, great. If not, you just pick a position that's comfortable for you. And all we're going to do is just slowly get back in touch with the rhythm of our breath, and we're going to move through a 4x4 breath. So being comfortable. As you start to take your next inhalation, just slowly to yourself internally, just count up to the number 4 as you breathe in. And either back down from 4 or up to 4 again as you breathe out. And again, inhaling for the count of 4. Exhaling for a count of 4. Breathing in for a count of 4. Breathing out for a count of 4. Breathing in for a count of 4. When you get to the top of this breath, just pause a little longer. Exhaling for a count of 4. And when you get to the bottom of the exhale, again, pause for a little moment. And then again, inhaling, finding a rhythm with this. Pausing at the top and exhaling. Pausing at the bottom. And just take yourself through this for 4 more rounds. Pausing at the top and bottom for as long as you feel comfortable to do so. When you come to the end of that 4th round for you, softly blinking open your eyes. And if you're not there already, just slowly bring yourself up into a comfortable cross-legged seat. We're going to do a little bit of moving through the spine before we come down to the floor, thinking about that whole region of the side waists where the liver and gallbladder channels pass through each other. And once you've found that comfortable upright seat, we're just going to float your left hand, if you're doing this the same direction as me, down to the floor, and then nice and slowly raising your right arm up as you take a breath in. And on the exhale, just folding to the side. As you breathe in, float yourself up just a little, And angle your belly and chest down toward that knee and exhale to come forward. And then turning back to the side, and on a breath in, floating up and bringing that arm down. Changing sides, inhaling the opposite arm up and over. Lifting up just a little as you breathe in, turning downward and exhaling. Reversing that, turning chest to the front, breathing in to lift up and exhaling down. We're going to repeat that twice more. Inhaling. Following your breath, moving with that. Opposite side, inhaling. Folding over. Turning down. And lifting up. One more time either side. You choose the pace that's right for you. Awakening up the side of the body. Nice. And then as you lift yourself up, you're going to take the block, bring it with you, and then bring yourself all the way down onto your back. I'm just laying there for a moment. If you can recall from the presentation, the section of the gallbladder that travels along the base of the skull, or the back of the head rather, and along the base of the skull. We're now going to take the block and just give that occiput region of the skull a little massage. So we want to take the block and just slide it underneath the back of the skull. Now some people like to have the block up on the high end and even perhaps on a little bit of an angle. And what you're trying to do is get the edge of the block to really line up with the base of your skull and the flesh that's just beneath that. And you might want to keep your fingers around the edges of the block to keep it steady. And the last little thing that I find helpful is letting your chin fall a little bit closer to the chest. Sometimes just that pressure alone can feel like plenty. But if it feels right for you, you can also begin to very slowly turn the head from side to side. And what we're aiming to do here is bring some pressure, some massage, and some circulation to those really thick tendons of your trapezius muscles that cross the base of the skull and come up and attach to the back of the head. They can get really tight. They can be the root source of headaches if you have a tendency toward those kinds of headaches. It can feel like a lovely thing to do if you've been sitting at your computer all day. And so we're just going to take a couple of minutes to feel this one out. If you feel like you've had enough, just come and rest in a rebound. Otherwise, just moving through in a way where your breath and your movement are listening to each other. There might be points in the rolling where you feel like your body wants you to stop and pause. Or even slow down. So you can spend as much time as you need with this. And when that feels complete for you, just allow the head to come to stillness. And we're going to take that block out and let the skull come down to rest on your mat and allow that tissue some time to rebound. We're going to start moving into our first shape for the sequence now. We're going to move into our banana pose. So from being on your back, we're going to float the arms up over the head. Hands can fall to the ground, or you can interlace your hands under your head. We're going to open up the right side of the body, so therefore we will be walking the feet over to the left side of your mat. We'll be doing the same thing with the upper body. So that little movement flow at the beginning was to loosen us up for this. We're going to lift the head and shoulder blades and wiggle the upper body over to the left. So a side bend on the floor or on the ground. Feel free to hook feet together if that suits you, or just let both heels fall to the floor. Try your right or your left foot if you've never explored those before. And allow yourself to be really quiet and present to whatever sensations begin to emerge up along the right side of your body. And if you find it helpful, whilst you're witnessing that, come back to your 4x4 breath. Slow and steady. We're going to be here for a few minutes, but if you need to come out sooner than that, please do, and we'll meet you in the rebound. And wherever you've been feeling the concentration points of sensation along the right side of your body, offer those places your next big inhale. And exhale out of the mouth. Releasing your feet, your head and your upper body, and come and let that rest. from being on your back, we're now going to use the block as a way to support the underneath of the pelvis for a playful flip of our dragon pose. So thinking about how the liver channels run down through the front of the hip flexors and how that can be a really intense place to target in your yin practice. This is one of my favorite ways to do that. So we're going to walk both feet up onto the mat, lift up the hips. Now you can keep it low. You might not get as much sensation in the hip flexors if you keep it low. I have a preference for flipping the block on its medium edge, and you really want to have that crossing both edges of the sacrum. We're going to start by focusing on the right hip flexor, which means that leg is going to extend out long, and we're going to see how we go bringing the left knee in toward the body and extending out through the right leg. Now you might find you need to worm that left leg around into the side. That might make it easier for you to hold on. You might want to hold on to the back of the thigh. Whatever makes it fairly soft for your biceps. You don't want to have to be contracted the whole time. And you'll probably notice that if you drift this knee from side to side, it might shift the awareness of stretch across slightly different places in that right hip flexor, maybe even up into the psoas. Now, if you're finding that this is just not really doing it for you, you are absolutely welcome to come out of this shape, come up into a more traditional lunge position and take a dragon that suits you, that targets your right hip flexor. Otherwise, if you're here still, allow this right leg to be fairly relaxed and heavy. Even if your shoulder blades are not completely on the floor, invite a feeling into your shoulder blades that is also heavy and sinking, and a softness to your face. And we're going to be here for a couple of minutes as well. So take care of you. If you need to come out sooner, please do so. Take a really full breath into your whole right hip area. Breathing out. And easing your way out of this one. Sometimes I even just like to drag that foot back up onto the mat. Slowly remove the block out from underneath you. Now you might want to bring both knees up into the chest for a little bit of mindful movement before you rebound. So please do what feels good for you, and then calm and let all of that settle for a while. Breathing in deeply. Breathing out completely. Bringing your feet up onto the mat, and we're just going to slowly roll over to the right. And we're just going to use this as a kind of a crawl up into our next shape, which is going to be sleeping swan. So let your body weight be heavy as you roll over onto your side. And then as you let both hands come to the floor, this might just be a really economic way for you to drag your right leg forward, exploring coming into your sleeping swan. Now, if sleeping swan's no good or it really bothers your front knee, you can always bend that back knee a little bit more for deer pose. But if sleeping swan's okay, the back leg's extended, pointing wherever it wants to, and we're really now shifting focus into the right gluteal area, so that deep gallbladder area. So you might stay upright for a while if that's better for you. And then there's also the option, if it feels right for you, to explore coming closer to the floor, whether you're on your forearms or supporting your head somehow, or maybe head comes all the way down as well. And if you've come all the way down to the floor, the sound of your breath might be better amplified. So you can use that as something to focus on whilst we spend some time here feeling into the body. Breathing in deeply, breathing out completely. Ambling your way out of that shape and into wherever is going to be restful. You might find that it makes sense for you to simply slip down onto the belly. This might be where you want to rebound. Or you might return all the way onto your back. It's up to you. Somewhere where your whole right leg can be heavy and effortless. And spending some time resting here. Okay. So this is our transition point to shift into the opposite side of that sequence. So I bet you're feeling a little bit unbalanced or things are interesting from right to left. So in your own way, we're going to come onto the back again and start balancing this whole thing out. So we're going to start by picking up our banana again. So arms come up over the head, and this time feet move across to the right. Upper body folding across to the right, whatever you like to do with the feet. Waking up that whole side body, giving that gallbladder channel space to run. And where you feel the sensation along the left-hand side of the body emerging, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but many people do feel it strongly at the side waist. You might even choose to actively breathe against that or into that sensation. Like the sensation and your breath are communicating with each other. Sometimes when we feel really crowded internally, it's very difficult to make decisions or find our directions. So the whole intention of this practice is to make space. When there is space, things can flow. When there is space, things can heal. And when there is space, you can have clarity on what isn't working, what you no longer want, and where you might want to start heading. And we're going to be here for a couple of minutes. And again, where you can feel that sensation. The strongest along your left side body. Take a deep breath into that. Clear it out. And begin to release. Come and rest. Reaching out for where you left your block, and we're now going to pick up our upside down dragon. So dragging in the feet, lifting up the hips, make sure that that sacrum is really supported across both edges, and then beginning to guide the right knee in toward the body, wherever it needs to be. If it really pinches you, right where the hip bone and the thigh meet, take it out to the side. See if that's helpful. And as the left leg extends, we are inviting sensation into that whole front of the hip flexor, maybe feeding up into the psoas. You might find over the period of time that you're here, that sensation spreads further and wider into the body. So we are just witnessing that, observing that, breathing into that. Softening through the jaw, heavy through the shoulder blades. And we're going to be here for a few minutes. Breathing deeply into your left hip socket. Breathing out. Easing your way out. Clearing out the block. Maybe hug it out, especially for that left hip. Nice and slow. And come and let that settle, rebounding. Long, slow inhale. Long, slow exhale. When you're ready to move, dragging your feet up onto the mat, rolling your body weight heavily over to your left as we circularly drag our way up into our sleeping swan or your deer pose if that's better for you. Often we have different things going on in one knee versus the other. Balancing out the gallbladder region of the left outer hip. So take your time with it. Stay propped up for as long as you want. And then if and when it feels right to do so, change the heights. Wherever you feel like you can be very effortless and connect deeply to the rhythm of your breath. Breathing in, breathing out, climbing out. Just noticing where your block is. I'm going to come and rebound on my belly. You rebound where it feels good for you, but have the block nearby because we're going to come back to that in a moment. Letting the body rest into the floor as you rebound. So how's that whole right leg, left leg situation feeling now? Does it feel like they've met each other? Do they feel a bit similar? Maybe the left leg is still singing louder because we just moved through that. Letting your whole body sink into the mat. Okay, now we're going to find that block. And if you're not already there, come on over onto your belly. So we started with the block at the base of the skull, massaging out all of that tenderness tissue at the back of the head. And if you recall, all of the gallbladder region of the forehead and the eyebrows and the temples feature prominently on the face. So before we come into our final Shavasana, we're just going to balance out the back of the head to the front of the head with a little bit of massage for the forehead. So it's up to you again how high you prop this. My suggestion is that you try and find a way where you don't have to work your arms too strongly. And then it can be quite intense because there's a lot of nerve endings in the skin of the face, is to bring the forehead down onto the block. And automatically there's that meeting of two surfaces, there's that acupressure. And then in your own time, like we did with the back of the head, just rolling your forehead along the block from side to side. It might be just the tiniest little bit of a movement from side to side. Or you might even find that you want to roll all the way to the edges of your temples. Noticing where it feels really intense and where it doesn't really feel like there's much sensation at all. You can try different heights, of course. Are you still breathing? Now you can enjoy that for as long as you want. And when it feels like you're done, when you feel content, allow your head to stop rolling and come to a still point, floating your head up off the block. And in a slow motion way, rolling over onto your back. And this might be where you also bring in any layers to keep yourself warm. There's a good chance here that your forehead is going to be buzzing and tingling after the block work. So we just allow that to simmer away. whilst the rest of the whole back of your body sinks into the mat. We've freed up and cleared all this space along the sides of the body. Connecting ourselves back to the feeling of stretching and limbering up. Every time you release a whole lung full of air, you help the body subtly clear internal tensions. So as we travel through this Shavasana, allow yourself to gently focus on your exhalations so that all these potential frustrations or tight points that you've been holding on to in your emotional body have a chance to be released through the breath. Softening the jaw, softening the face. Starting to come back to the feeling of your inhales. Guide yourself into the sensation of breath filling you up. Lungs expanding. Belly rising. Chi lifting upwards and outwards. And after a few of those deeper breaths, just begin to call in some other kind of small movement in the body, in the hands or the head or the feet. In time, those small movements can grow into something bigger, like a stretch or a rolling to your side. And then when you're ready, we'll come and meet in an upright seat. Noticing how you're feeling. Bringing your hands into prayer. And may this practice that we've shared today help to inspire and lift you into your own plans, your own visions, your own courage. We'll take a collecting breath together. Breathing out. And thank you for joining me in this practice today. Namaste.